In China, during the late 4th century or early 3rd century BCE, the sage Lao Tzu of the Zhou dynasty, a record keeper, leaves his work to travel west. He is stopped by a guard who requests a book of his wisdom. He writes the Tao Te Ching, the foundational text of what becomes Taoism. At least, that's how the story goes. The cosmology and philosophy of the Tao Te Ching is heavily influenced by the I Ching, wherein the concepts of yin and yang are foundational. These concepts were combined into a popular symbol, the Taijitu, or, named for its components by Westerners, the yin-yang. It is through this symbol that we will begin to explore the Tao Te Cell. Two common misperceptions of the Taijitu are that the white portion represents good while the black represents evil. This is purely Western thinking based on 2,000 years of Christian cultural dominance. The second misperception is these opposite concepts are opposing concepts. Rather, these concepts are complementary. Indeed, the predominant nature of each is defined by having aspects of the opposite nature within. It is an alternative form of classification of ideas, lacking in precision and quantifiability, but flexible enough that it can be applied to anything. If you can relate to enjoying a song for the sensory stimulation rather than the technicalities of key, tempo, and time signature, then you've got some idea of why Taijitu-based classification is appealing. Yang, the large white portion, is primarily associated in Taoism with action or being. The other traditional concepts of masculinity, heat, light, strength,
reason,
expansion, and upward are also used to evoke yang within the Tao Te Ching. Lao Tzu suggests that elements of everyday life are usually conceptually yang due to the nature of doing. Yin, the black portion, is primarily passivity or non-being. Again, Lao Tzu uses the traditional femininity, cold, dark, weakness, intuition, contraction, and down to evoke yin. I suppose I should note here that when gender specifically is evoked, Rule 34 does apply. Lao Tzu claims that all of existence is varying combinations of yin and yang. It is yin and yang combining that new things come into being, sexual reproduction being one example. I'll go into cosmology in depth later, but for now let us think of it in terms of binary code, everything definable by zeros and ones. The Taijitu is intended symbolically to represent the Tao. It is yin and yang in perfect balance and harmony. Tao is the state where the duality of yin and yang ceases to exist and aspects of both are a unified idea. Tao is roughly translated as way or path. For the Taoist, balancing and unifying yin and yang is the focus. Lao Tzu described this as turning or entering into any number of concepts that evoke yin. In Zen Buddhism, there's a kind of story, statement, or question called a koan. The defining characteristic of a koan is that it is nonsensical on a rational level, but if approached intuitively has been said to lead to enlightenment. This is a simplistic definition, but captures the essence of what a koan is. One reading of the Tao Te Ching will show where this Buddhist practice gained its inspiration. Many of these concepts are not exclusive to Taoism or even the philosophies of the East. Western mystics and alchemists had similar, if not exactly, the same concepts involved in their literature and practice. The most common of which I would say is probably Hermeticism, which Aleister Crowley was a member of in his early years as a mystic. Hermeticism has 7 primary laws, which the 4th and the 6th specifically are explained in this explanation of Taijitu. The universality of Hermetic laws across various forms of mysticism will prompt me to reference them for brevity's sake, as they are outlined in such a yang way that it translates well into rational explanation. Law is an apt title for them, as they are consistently found throughout the various forms of mysticism out there, Taoism included, that they are functional rules to work with, especially as they counterbalance an excess of yin if held too strictly. This next portion is less about the yin-yang and more about the second of the Hermetic laws, that being, in the short form, dubbed the law of correspondence, which is stated as above, so below, as below, so above. Oh yeah, if you haven't noticed, a major cornerstone of Taoism, or mysticism in general, is anything other than some other flavor of atheism, hinges entirely on the many worlds interpretation of quantum physics. If that gets falsified, I'm essentially an atheist on the spot. I call the law of correspondence the lost law, because it seems that ever since it was first spoken or recorded or whatever, it's been incompletely interpreted at best. Most saw this as divine knowledge being accurate in the material world. And while there may still be some element of truth to that,
from a certain point of view,
it's not solid enough to be a dogma, although most mystics out there will act as though it is. However, the part that is forgotten is that knowledge of the material world could be used to provide insight into the non-material. Any claims about the non-material can be accepted as a possibility if it has a correlative in the material world. By ignoring this aspect of the law of correspondence, alchemists failed for centuries to discover anything relevant, rightly earning them the criticism of Robert Boyle, who in turn failed in taking the knowledge he gained as a chemist back to his dabblings in alchemy. Over-yinned modern mystics and self-proclaimed gurus still fail to synthesize actual scientifically gained knowledge and understanding, and instead point to mathematical concoctions of theoretical physics every bit as arcane as the formulas of the alchemists of the past and call it proof, when at best it can only be a modicum of defense, suggesting the possibility that metaphysics might be real. Anyway, I'll list the Hermetic laws on the side for you guys to peruse. This should provide enough of a background that the next part can go in any direction if there are any questions or confusion from me failing to describe something accurately enough. But tentatively for now, the next video is intended to address some of the problems and my own personal view on the first of the Hermetic laws. Till next time, peace.